Plan to add Soil Biotics organic products to your 2024 crop program. Soil Boost is a raw humate product that is broadcast applied pre-plant to help improve soil structure, maintain nutrient availability, and stimulate microbial activity. Soil Biotics PHK is a dry granular humate product using a proprietary carrier blend. It enhances the uptake of nutrients, increases water holding capacity, and enhances soil biological structure. PHK may be broadcast, used in furrow, or banded. From pre-plant soil preparation to post-harvest soil maintenance, Soil Biotics organic products are formulated to work together to provide a continuous beneficial growth environment to meet all of your organic agricultural needs. For product details, visit soilbiotics.com. The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems, the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 800-801-3596. And thanks to Byron Seeds.
You're listening to Rooted in Organic Podcast, and today we are in Bluffton, Georgia. Brian Wood and myself, Mike Klein, are sitting down with Will Harris from White Oak Pastures. We just got done doing a wonderful tour of the farm, which is really intriguing. You've really built something here, and community, I know, is a huge part of it. So, Will, thank you so much for taking the time and sitting down with us. And can you give us a little more of an intro about who you are and what it is that you do, and kind of your history to what got you to today?
I can, and I thank y'all for coming to see us. So, White Oak Pastures is my family's farm in Bluffton, Georgia. My great-grandfather came here in 1866 and worked the land, followed by his son, my grandfather, followed by his son, my father, followed by me, and I'm being followed by my two daughters, and they have 5 children who live on the farm. So we are the sixth generation on the farm, although the 6th generation hadn't contributed much. They still babies, but I guess the thing that I find most interesting about the farm is how in the 150-something years we've been here, 6 generations, it's come full circle. The way my great-grandfather and grandfather farmed this land, it was all about the land and the animals and the community. And that was the wealth. My dad, born in 1920, took over the farm post-World War II, 1945. And he was responsible for the real industrialization of the farm. Under his management, it moved from being a polyculture of a lot of different species of animals and plants to a monoculture of only cattle. He was a cattleman. He was very good at it. He took a lot of pride in it. I think he prided himself in being a specialist. He never said that, but I think that was my sense. I was born in 1954, worked on the farm all my childhood and loved it, and all I wanted to do was be an industrial cattleman like my dad. So I went to the University of Georgia, majored in animal science, graduated in 1976, and I came home and followed my dad in running the farm as a very industrial monocultural cattle operation. It was financially successful. I went back and looked here not too many years ago, and I never lost money in the cattle business, not a single year when I was farming industrially. We paid taxes every year. Some years we didn't pay much. Some years we paid a lot, but it was a profitable business. And I loved it and ran it industrially and thought I was really good at it. In the mid-'90s, for a number of reasons, I became increasingly dissatisfied with that model and started moving away from it pretty rapidly, pretty quickly, and really liked it better. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but the departure from the industrial monocultural cattle operation actually was looking more and more like the multi-species operation that my great-grandfather and grandfather operated. That was not my intent. I did not set out to emulate that, but I emulated it. And I ran the farm that way, or have run the farm that way for the last 25 or so years, and made an incredible amount of change in the way we do it. Some of it has proven to be successful financially, some of it not. There are reasons to do for farmers to consider doing what I did, but economic enrichment is not necessarily one of them. We're doing okay, but the return on investment is not good. Quality of life is fantastic.
So you're kind of an anomaly when it comes to changing drastically and not because of economic issues. You were successful, but what actually made you look at it from a different perspective to make that change?
From the movement from industrial?
Yeah, from the industrial model.
Things that I had always thought were fine in terms of animal welfare and ecological impact ceased to be fine with me. It became increasingly problematic for me as I looked at it closer. And kind of a confession is that this realization probably came from the fact that I was a very heavy-handed industrial producer. Label rates didn't mean too much to me. If it said put a pint, I might put a quart. If it said give them 1 cc per 100 pounds, I might give them 2 cc's per 100 pounds. And I think because I was that kind of heavy-handed farmer, the unintended consequences of using those industrial tools became apparent to me.
In what ways?
From the land perspective, just walking in the edge of the woods where it had not been treated with chemical fertilizer and pesticides and tillage, and looking at the soil, and then looking just right over there, 30 feet away, at the soil that had been tilled for 100 years or whatever, and a lot of chemical fertilizer, a lot of pesticides, and just looking at the difference and seeing that one of them was a dead mineral medium and the other one was teeming with life. I knew which way I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you say it's not economically better going this direction, I guess I'm curious to not put exact numbers, but what do you mean exactly by that? And you were making enough money in the industrial way that you could still do that successfully today, you feel like, and going the way you have has been more of a benefit to the land, but not to you personally.
Well, it has been to me personally, but as far as the economic benefit and net worth on the financial statement. So many of the improvements we've made are super long term. When we raise the organic matter in our land, which we have done from 0.5% to 5%, doesn't show up on my balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say, well, that land was worth X dollars per acre, and now it's worth 3 times that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way the bank looks at a balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very comfortable with the long-term benefits, but the way we account for profitability in the modern world does not work in this generational approach we take. When an industrial farmer, like I used to be, and like most people still are, does financial planning, they're looking at a 12-month window.
Mm-hmm.
If I do these things for the next 12 months for this growing season, I should have this amount of net worth versus what I've got today. And it'll be, if it wasn't a positive number, you do something different.
Mm-hmm.
The things that we do here are so generational. When you raise the organic matter and soil, I keep going back to that because that's kind of the easiest one to see. It's not the only one. Then it becomes a very generational thing.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you use modern accounting to accurately reflect the benefit of increasing the organic matter of the life in the soil or increasing the productivity of your herd? My herd is more productive every year. We talked about it when we were riding around.
Mm-hmm.
We save heifers and bulls, and increasingly they fit this land. Increasingly they do better and better. They make more. We get more and more calves with less and less cost. We can talk about that a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't show up on the financial statement.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
Modern accounting and generational land management do not merge well.
But if you didn't do the things you've done, and I know this is an unanswerable question, but you went through the generations here, would you have 2 daughters coming back to the farm? Would you be able to? Would you have recommended them to come back to the farm with the old way you were doing things?
My daughters absolutely would not have come back to farm the way I did industrially. Whereas I was raised never wanting to do anything but come back and run this farm. The difference in time and gender and technology and other economics and other factors. My daughters were not raised to come back here. They were welcome back. But whereas I followed my dad every day, they went to ballet and karate and piano and voice and all those things, and it was fine. It was fine with me.
Mm-hmm.
But they certainly would not have considered coming back, they didn't necessarily make the choice to come back in college. I put all 3 of my daughters through college. All 3 of them graduated. And nobody said the way I did, I'm coming back. I'll go. I'm coming back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Was switching your operation, was there a community mindset to that change, or did the community, what you've done with the town of Bluffton here is incredible, and you had just showed when you took us around here, community is such a big part of this. Did that just come along with it, like as a side effect, or was that kind of a long-term goal?
That's a very good question, and it absolutely was not a long-term goal initially. I was born in 1954. The economic decline of this community started post-World War II. This town, Bluffton, Georgia, has never had a mill or a factory. It's always been an agricultural town only. Never had a railroad. So it was a prosperous little town when it was a farm, a pre-World War II farm town. It had a concrete swimming pool and, a number of attributes that are evidence of the wealth. But post-World War II, when it started to atrophy, like most farm towns have done across the country, and continued that all my life. So I never, ever thought that anything I could do would be of benefit to Bluffton. It was shrinking from before I was born, and I never intended to do anything to change that because I didn't think I could. And I can remember of a guy was visiting here, and I was showing him around. He said, "This is a nice little town." And I did a double take. I thought he was kidding, and he wasn't. I said, this is, and it is. It's we have. When I was farming industrially, I had. I was working a little over 1,000 acres of land with monoculture cattle, had a feedlot, had a lot of things going on with it. But I had 3 or maybe 4 employees doing about $1 million volume a year, maybe not quite, depends on the year. Made money every year, not a lot, but it was profitable. I had no debt. and the town was in decline, and I was fine with it. We started changing things, and we started hiring more and more and more people. Today we've got about 170 employees. And when we started bringing these people in, they needed a place to live, and a place to eat, and a place to sleep, and a place to play. And so we wound up reinvesting in the town just to fill an immediate need with employees, not with the intention of rebuilding the town, but that's what happened. Mm-hmm. And that's highly replicatable. That can be done over and over again. This was done here by a guy with modest wealth, modest education, modest intellect, modest. Nothing special here. What can be done? What we have done here can very easily be emulated over and over and over across the country, and should be. It really should be. And one of the reasons that we have started the nonprofit I mentioned to you earlier, and is to bring people here to demonstrate that this can be done. And I don't want to do it again. And I'm not going to do it in another town. Mm-hmm. But there can be another farm in another town. And there should be. There should be a White Oak Pastures or some facsimile thereof in every agricultural county in the country, or 2 or 3. I don't know what it can stand.
Mm-hmm. So it gets complicated, though, when you're trying to tell somebody or say to somebody to replicate what you're doing on your farm, and you're telling them it's not as economically beneficial as doing the way you're doing. Say they're an industrial, successful farmer at that time, and they want to make a switch, and you're saying to them it's not as economically successful, but you can build everything else around it. How do you value that?
Yeah, so first of all, you said what I said. I'm not correcting you, but when I say it's economically not the thing to do, I mean based on the accounting, financial model that our banks and
the 12-month model.
Yeah. I think that the things that I've done in the last 25 years probably will increase, I'm not sure of it, but probably will increase the net worth of my family going forward generationally more than if I just kept doing what I was doing. The model that I stepped away from brought this land from being whatever it was, 5, 6, 7, 8% organic model, down to 0.5%. Well, I was selling the productivity of, or me and my dad, my granddad, were selling the productivity of our land for short-term profit that we were living on. And my neighbors are still doing that. And they're good people. They're wonderful people. But that's what that industrial, mechanical, chemical oriented production model gives you.
Now,
So it's when you start measuring, you ask in a simple way, you got the right to do that. How do you justify it? But it's complex.
Oh, I know.
I mean, it's very complex. And
Yep.
when I tell and when I warn people, as I do, be careful about doing this. Be careful. You can go broke doing it. It's because I've seen people go broke doing it. Because those investments that you have to make the changes have got to be paid for today. And the benefit comes over generationally. Literally, generationally. I would tell a person who was 40 years old that wanted to do this but didn't have anyone to take over after that, I would tell them, I don't think you want to do that. You need a plan. Because you're not going to have enough time. You're 40. You're going to work till you're 60 or 70 or whatever. I hope beyond that, I'm 70. The economics has got to be completely rethought. And the people who you do business with are going to probably not going to embrace your rethinking.
Well, and that's exactly why I asked the question in that way of a short-term economic thinking, because a lot of farmers are in exactly that position. And what you're doing, driving through the countryside, whether it's here in Georgia or back home in Michigan or in Ohio, it doesn't matter. There's a ton of these little towns that are dead. And I would love to see it recreated. But too many farmers are stuck in that short-term way of thinking. So in order to try and have a group of farmers or a farmer decide to do something that is generational, it seems to go in phases. That first they look at that 12-month economic, then they start thinking more generationally.
Well, the old European model was to leave the estate to the eldest son. And I think I think that there's a lot of wisdom in leaving the estate to someone who's going to maintain it and feed it. Now, the eldest son was a cop out. That was so you wouldn't have to say, "I like you, but I like you." But the concept of and I have 3 daughters. I'm leaving the farm to 2 daughters. I have 2 that came back that are working on it, and they're going to inherit it. And it's going to be a good deal for them. I'm not trying to punish the one that didn't come back. But if I if I took that easy third that makes everybody feel good, all that's going to do is cause a financial burden on the 2 that did come back. It's wrong. It's just wrong.
Going back to the small town America, we took an RV trip out west this summer, and driving through the Midwest, the amount of small agriculture towns this size that there's an old abandoned grain mill there, and just see the economic collapse of that town. I think there's a direct correlation with 0.5% of organic matter in that town dying. In order to bring your organic matter up is going to take years. Well, if you work it in a way like you're doing here, you're going to need more people. That town will come back with the organic matter. We are in mainstream agriculture, we are selling our future for a short-term gain, and it's going to be really, really hard to change that in a big way. But you can do it a small step at a time.
Well, What you're talking about is, I refer to it as industrialized, commoditized, and centralized. And that's what my dad's generation did to agriculture. And it was, in the short run, it was very successful for them. They had more cash than they'd ever had. My generation followed and further industrialized, commoditized, and centralized. And I think that we have reached the point that we've seen the ugly underbelly of that. When you centralize, you that's when you impoverish rural communities.
Mm-hmm.
The wealth flows out of here so quickly. There's no value addition. The raw material is moved to whatever centralized facility further processes and adds value to it. When you commoditize, you just lower the value of what you produce. You're working towards a lowest common denominator.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time before commoditization that farmers were producers were financially rewarded for producing the best crop they could produce. If I was the best hog guy in Bluffton, Georgia, I got more for my hogs than somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I did better. So I strived to have the best hogs, and everybody else strived to have the best ones they could have. And when we commoditized, we said, okay, lowest common denominator. This is how lower quality you can raise and still market. So we just plummeted quality.
Mm-hmm.
Centralization, industrialization, all these things were put into place by my dad's generation and further reinforced in my generation for economic reason. But there was a horrible negative, unintended consequence to those changes. And what we're doing here is trying to reverse that, those unintended horrible consequences. And that's why it winds up being generational. It doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And I worry about how much of it we're going to be able to see done. To be able to do, if this model that we have here is something that someone did want to emulate, if they did, you're going to add cost to your production. You're not throwing those costs off to a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico and 0.5% organic amount of soil and pesticide residue in the polar ice cap. You're absorbing those costs, not throwing them off.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to get more for your product. You got to you've got to find a consumer who's willing to pay more, and that's not easy. There are a lot of consumers out there that do a good job talking about doing the right thing for the economy and the ecology, but when it's time to write the check, they want to go to the discount store and fill up the buggy.
So back to you're concerned by, I hope you're wrong when you're saying that you're concerned about how many people are out there that are willing to actually.
I do too. I hope I'm wrong, and I may be, but I don't.
What makes you say that though? Because you're the one doing this, and I'm assuming you've run up against some of the pushback to pay more for your food.
I don't think there are many people out there that would argue if you just open the discussion about animal welfare. There are not many people that are going to say, "I don't care." I mean, most people do care.
Mm-hmm.
If you talked about the pesticides in the environment and all these things that we can talk about, there aren't many people out there who would tell you It just doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I won't be able to go and eat a hamburger for $1.
Mm-hmm.
But partially probably because of greenwashing, big companies that have learned how to do what they want to do to take cost out of production, but describe it in a way that is not offensible. Those people are able to go to the store or the restaurant or whatever and see products that are probably in their production harmful to the animal or the welfare or the animal welfare or the rural community or the environment and say, it's okay, it's fine. And look, it's 10, 20, 30% cheaper. It's fine. And
uses words that makes them feel good.
And you know, people are word driven, and people are so far from here. I mean, you fellas are agricultural people, but you know, and I've shown you the farm today. You probably saw some stuff that you hadn't seen exactly before, and people who are not farm people, you know, people who are raised in urban areas and condominiums and work in high-rise buildings, have so little understanding. And I'm not saying they're not smart people. They know their life. They don't know this life.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've now gotten 2, 3, 4 generations from the agriculture, whether it was on the farm or in an agricultural community, that there just is no understanding.
And they're generations from modern agriculture. And we're further than that away from real regenerative agriculture.
We had talked when we were driving around about your, the pasture poultry business is a really, really tough business because of the cost of raising them the way you raise chicken versus the industrial model. When you look at animal welfare, I think, is there any industrially raised chicken that has any concept of animal welfare or animal well-being? Because that is not the model I want to eat chicken from. Yet that is the model where 99% of chicken comes from.
You raise an excellent point, and probably the biggest business mistake I ever made was going into the pasture poultry business in a very big way. And what had occurred is we had done really well with our red meat operation, beef, pork, lamb, goat. And then it occurred to me that, first of all, it occurred to me that poultry would be good on my pastures. I needed that bird impact out there. So I wanted to have poultry. And then, I could see the statistics. People eat 100 pounds of poultry a year. And it takes, that's as much as all the other proteins added together, just about. So I said, I can do that. So I built a fairly large poultry processing plant, 1,000 birds a day, which is, a big industrial plant will do 250,000 birds a day, but for a pastured poultry, 1,000 birds is a pretty big plant. So I built it, and I'm a farmer, not an economist. I didn't do didn't do nearly as much economic planning as I should have, and it was a dismal financial failure. We have lost a lot of money in the pastured poultry business, and I realized I had screwed up. I attended a meeting in Boulder, Colorado, and we had a dinner one night in the Boulder Rama Hotel, which is 1800s restored hotel. That's where we were staying. I was eating supper in the dining room. I was walking around looking at, and on the wall there was a menu from like 1890. I'm not sure exactly. I got a picture of it somewhere, and it said, and I took a picture of it because it said, beef plate, 90 cents. Pork plate, $1. Chicken plate, $1.40, or something to that effect. And it just hit me that I had gone back to that model of raising poultry, but I was going to raise poultry I couldn't sell. You could still buy, at that time, you could go to the store and buy fine chicken for $1 a pound.
Mm-hmm.
My cost was probably $4 a pound. So we were fighting a losing battle. I could sell a little bit, but I couldn't sell enough. And I still want to be in the poultry business. I have a need on my land for that poultry impact. It has a benefit. I showed you today of some really green areas where I raised poultry, and that poultry manure had really fed the land. But I can't afford to do it. So I'm very fortunate because I have kind of outgrown my red meat plant. So we're going to spend about $2 million converting the poultry plant into a second red meat plant that will. I can't slaughter cattle now. I can slaughter sheep, goats, lamb, pigs in there, and we'll try to make it work. I'm still going to try to keep the poultry slaughter capacity because I can find a way to make a profit with that. I don't have to have a profit. If I can just get my cost, I'd be delighted to do it.
Because of what it does to your fields,
Correct.
because of what it does to your soil. Is turkeys an option, or is turkeys way too, it's Thanksgiving?
No, we raise turkeys, and we used to. We were able to get industrial turkeys 52 weeks a year, and we did. And we kept turkeys on the ground all the time. We can only get the heritage birds once a year in the spring to raise them for Thanksgiving, and we did that. And we did that this year. We sold 2,000 or 3,000 birds for Thanksgiving. It was good, and we recovered our costs on that and had the benefit of the land, so it was a good deal. And I hope I can keep doing that.
And the industrial turkeys, are you doing like a turkey breast and like a lunch meat type thing, or?
That's what we're doing. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And we probably should go backwards on. We talked about the farm a little bit, but I think we take it for granted. We've just driven all the farm. How many acres are you farming? And then the animals, I know you went through what you slaughter, but just what are you raising and maybe some numbers behind it? We didn't say that at the beginning.
This farm that we call the home farm is about 3,200 acres. It's about 1,000 acres that I inherited from my dad, granddad, great-granddad. About 1,000 acres of land that I have bought in the last 15 or 20 years, and about 1,000 acres that I lease. And here we raise cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, and we did raise chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, and ducks. Now the only birds we've got are egg-laying birds. Hope we'll go back to it. We have a garden. We raise small, but we plant about 2 acres. It's about 6 acres in the garden, but we plant about 2 acres at the time. We have honey, we got bees. We got a few pecans, a few nut trees. We got a little orchard of fruit and nut trees we planted that we're developing.
And I know you had said when we met earlier that you also are doing some grazing on solar land as well. Correct.
We are grazing about 2,000 acres of solar voltaic arrays. And there's actually some land outside the arrays that we're able to use down there. And that's a really good enterprise that I recommend people look into. People who don't have a land base, if they can find a solar company to partner with. We get paid to maintain the vegetation, and we mow. We have mowers and we do mow, but we try to do as much of it as we can by grazing with sheep. And I think that I know we're able to do more and more of the plant control with grazing, and that'll get better and better in time as the plant species evolves and the land gets better from the sheep manure. We've also put poultry under those panels before, and I thought that was successful. But again, the marketing side of the poultry got in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So when you said you have to mow under them as well, is that like using a weed eater around the posts, or how clean do you have to keep those? Because that would be a lot of work.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of that.
Okay.
Our partner is a very progressive solar operator called Silicon Ranch from Nashville, Tennessee, and they have when we sold them on the idea of grazing as vegetation control, they had never done that, and were a little reluctant to go into it, but they have embraced it. And they have really worked with us on what does good vegetation management mean. You can't have vines climbing up the poles and touching the arrays. You can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
If the grass gets knee high around the pole, it's okay. It's not. So we're still evolving with that. They've been very good to work with, and they have actually looked for other people to graze for them. And in the absence of that, they've hired some really good people to graze their own sheep, and they've taken ownership of sheep.
Oh, wow.
Now, I should tell you that also I think that we should be grazing these arrays with species other than sheep. Sheep is the only thing that's an option with the off-the-shelf hardware that they're putting in today. Cattle will tear them up, goats will climb all over them, ... Don't even talk about buffalo. So the sheep are what you're limited to. But we are involved with a couple of things. One is White Oak Pastures received a $1 million grant to put in a cattle tracker paddle that is rugged enough and high enough for cattle to graze under. I got to find $2 more million to put with it, and I hadn't found that yet. But I got about 6 months, and we're working on it.
Mm-hmm.
We're also participating with Silicon Ranch. There was a different grant to experiment with what it takes to graze, how much more you got to spend on the hardware to graze cattle and not sheep. And I think that if we can, and we will, we're going to figure out how to graze cattle under them. And when we do, that's going to change it dramatically.
Because they can be more efficient?
Because they can be more efficient, and because there's more cattle to graze. We don't eat. What do we eat? A pound or so of lamb per year per person.
Sure. Yep.
So it's very low,
Yep.
and much of that's imported.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas cattle, and we eat, 80 pounds or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. So, and I think the cattle probably. Well, I'll take that back. I'm not saying cattle will do a better job than sheep, but cattle and sheep will do a better job than sheep. And if you got the array that cattle can graze under, and you put sheep in behind them, then you got both.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We had a local farmer that also has a manufacturing welding shop for his kids. So they make all kinds of farm equipment. They took a 0-turn mower and put a 9-foot sickle bar on the front of it to mow under solar panels for a guy that's grazing sheep. And they put a guard, so if he runs into a post, it'll break away and won't mow into it with the sickle.
Well,
So it's kind of neat because that guy's doing the same thing, and that's in Ohio.
I'd love it if you give my information to that guy. I'd like to see what he's got.
I will. I've actually got pictures I'll show you.
Yeah, I'd like to see them. I'm very interested in that, and I think there's a lot of innovative things that can be done.
It does look a lot like a Mad Max movie vehicle, but I think it's still in the early stages. But it's got potential for sure.
Well, there's some problems. Some of these arrays we grow have got what they call a tram line, a cab line that runs down the middle of it. So you got to turn around out in there, and that's so problematic as opposed to just going all the way through it and turning around on the other end and coming back. So there's a lot of things that the industry's got to learn. You got to remember that the solar photovoltaic industry was developed by brilliant engineers that very linear thinking, very focused on capturing that energy from the sun. And then on the other side, you've got us who are very cyclical in the way we think and have no idea about that technology. And so when we sit down and talk, it's not pretty. I mean, it's unpleasant. They're nice people, but we're speaking different languages.
What they're talking about, I'm completely lost. But then what we're talking about, they're completely lost. We're just both know a lot about completely different things. But that you are both talking and figuring out what you can do to use that land versus just roundupping underneath it and have a parking lot. It's when I see those areas that are just dead, I'm like, what a waste. There's so much to do.
But you're not talking a different language. They're talking capturing solar energy through a panel. You're talking capturing solar energy through a grass and then using animals to harvest it, and they've just got it's a different way. But like you said, there hasn't been a cross section, but you're finding the cross section.
It's very linear versus very cyclical. And I'll tell you, I'll tell you this. This may be too much to get into, but the CEO of Silicon Ranch is a really brilliant guy named Reagan Farr. And Reagan he's a CEO, MBA, CPA. I mean, just a brilliant.
All the letters behind his
all
name.
the letters. He's got all of them. And when this solar grazing deal down here was my idea because the Silicon Ranch bought a large farm from a friend of mine who farmed it. And I just did not want to see that put in these endless solar panels that they spray with Roundup. I just hated to see it. So I thought this was a Hail Mary pass from hell, but I put in to get the CEO down here and use some political capital I had out there to make it happen. And Reagan Farr came with one or two of his people, and I was not optimistic about this thing happening, and I don't think he wanted to be here much, but he's a nice guy, and so we were riding around, and we got to a spot on the farm. I could take you there right now, where we had done some mowing, bush hogging. We don't do much of that, but the situation was such that I had grazed over here and bush hogged over here. I said, whoa. I stopped the Jeep. I said, get out. And they got out. I said, all right. This had grown up in excess vegetation, and we mowed it. I said, here's the clippings. And very little of this will be back in that soil. It'll oxidize. Nothing's going to eat this. And then I stepped over the side that had been grazed, and it was cow manure. I said, this is capital. This is biological capital. This manure has been consumed by the cow and broken down by the microbes in that rumen, and now the microbes in the soil are going to further breaking it down, and it's going in the soil. Some of it goes up, flatulence or whatnot, but it's going in the soil. And he looked and he said, yeah. And he did. He got it. And it turns out his dad was the poultry specialist at, I think it was Mississippi, at a land-grant university, and I think it was Mississippi. So he had the mediational units. He'd been raised showing chickens and that sort of thing. But he got it, and then we did the deal. And the deal was painful. Me and my business people sat down with their business people, and we hammered through that contract and walk away from the table. I'm not going to do that. But we ultimately got it together, and it's a thing.
And you're doing that on at multiple locations?
On 3.
3. And how many acres is that?
About 2,000.
About 2,000. And you own the sheep that are on there?
Yes.
Okay. But you said they're also buying their own sheep for other projects?
On other arrays,
Other
correct.
arrays.
Yeah, they hired a guy, really sharp guy, and who's a sheep shepherd, and they own their own sheep and they're grazing their own arrays. And I think they are willing to let farmers do it if they can find a farmer that will do it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But that is a step in the right direction when it comes to all those arrays.
It is, but we do need to change the engineering on these arrays so that other species can graze on them. Unless Americans are going to start eating a lot more lamb and importing a lot less lamb, which there are economic reasons why people do what they do.
That importing, when on our ride around the farm, you were talking, it's not just lamb that you're dealing with, the importing, eating into your business. It's also the grass-fed cattle, beef, that imported grass-fed beef that is being able to be marketed as made in the USA or produced in the USA or whatever the wording is also a huge detriment to your business.
That has been devastating. So this business actually made really good money for the first few years after my conversion. The conversion was painful. But when we got the conversion made and found markets at Whole Foods Market and Publix and other grocery stores, it was a quite profitable farming operation. We weren't getting rich, but it was return on investment was good. And it was good enough that it brought the attention of other big multinational meat producers, beef companies, who got the rule changed so that the definition of product of the USA, with reference to beef, meat, went from born, raised, and slaughtered in the USA to value being added in the USA. And that just opened the door for imported grass-fed beef from Uruguay, Australia, New Zealand, and 20 other countries to come in. And it says grass-fed beef, product of the USA. And who knows? Mm-hmm. But it really took the profitability out of. And then what that product did is it replaced us in some of the big meat Whole Foods Market, they as an example, because they could buy that imported beef, grass-fed beef, and market it as part of the USA.
And significantly cheaper, I would assume.
I assume significantly cheaper. I don't know what they paid, but
sure,
they certainly use it as a lever to make us sell it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper till it just wasn't a good deal anymore. Mm-hmm. But we've gone from being, I was an industrial beef producer to being a grass-fed beef producer, but sold only to wholesale. Everything else, I don't have a retail market in Bluffton, Georgia. I got a little store, but
at least not for the amount
for the amount that we sell. Correct. I mentioned to you, Bluffton is in Clay County. It was the poorest county in the United States of America in 2020. Yeah,
it's amazing.
So I don't have much of a local market. Yeah. But we had to, we had to move from being a wholesale company to a more retail company, and we evolved. We were forced to evolve to online, and this year we actually will sell more online than we will direct to the wholesale.
Sure.
Do you drop ship that? I mean, that is shipped direct to consumer then?
Currently, our online is ordered on our website, whiteoakpastures.com, and sent to the house through FedEx or UPS. We're gonna have a little more volume when we do this plant alteration that I talked about earlier, and I don't want to increase my wholesale business because there's not much profit. I don't want to increase the online business because I worry about FedEx and UPS letting me down.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking for a third way of moving product. And I think that like these permanent farmers markets, I don't mean the Saturday morning at the church farmers markets. I don't think we can sell enough stuff there to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost of it is so much greater. I mean, a courier service delivering to pickup points or something. We've got to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're always going to be, with the model you have, you're going to always have to keep evolving, aren't you? Because if, like your grass-fed venture, right out of the gate, it was profitable. Well, when people see that it works, they're going to try to emulate your model but scale it like crazy to have more product, more margin. So you're going to continually need to evolve, won't you?
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, history has shown us that we got to evolve, or we will become financially irrelevant. We got to move. But now, I really, the part you said about others adapting what we're doing, that doesn't bother me too much. The idea of other American farmers emulating what we're doing in some way is attractive to me. And currently, we ship product, FedEx, UPS, to 48 states, and I don't want to. You know, I don't want. That's not the business model I want. You know, I want to sell all I produce in the smallest geographic area I can. It ain't gonna be Bluffton, Georgia, but Georgia, maybe Florida, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know what it's gonna have to be. And I think that if it goes the way I hope it goes, my sales won't go down. I don't care if they go up. I'm not trying to grow this business. It's bigger than I ever intended for it to be, and I don't ever care if it gets bigger. It doesn't matter. But I want to sell it in a smaller and smaller geographic area so that I'm spending less and less on shipping and shrinkage and whatever. And I want other people to serve the areas that I serve now. I hope it evolves that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's been much slower to do that than I had hoped for some of the reasons that we've already talked about. But that's still my hope.
I think one of, and this is probably small, much smaller in the grand scheme of things, but I know for years one of the knocks on 100% grass-fed beef is compared to grain-fed beef, it's like leather. But I do think some of that is in the way that grass-fed beef over a number of years has evolved from stock grazing to actually rotationally grazing. And I guess I'm curious of, you came from the industrial side. How did you learn grazing? How did you learn the proper way of just rotating pastures and what species to plant and all those kinds of things?
Re-ask me that question in a minute. Let me comment on the grass-fed versus. Let me do that.
Yep.
So when I majored in animal science at the University of Georgia College of Agriculture, not marketing. And when I sat down with the lady to build my first website, she didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't either. She knew how to build a website, and I knew how I was raising cattle. And I spit out all the information I'd ever been told about why grass-fed beef was so much better than industrial beef. And some of it just wasn't right. And it was a few years. This is back in the late 90s. It was a few years before I realized, I can tell you how I realized it, but I realized that, some of that stuff I'm claiming probably isn't right. It's not necessarily it's not a lie, but it's just not exactly right. Or I can be challenged on it, and it's just me fussing with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through our website 15 years ago or something. I don't know about time. But I went through the website and said, all right, any claims we make about animal welfare, that's good. We good at that. Any claims we make about ecological impact, we leave those. We good at that. Any claims we make about economic benefit to the rural community, they good. We leave those. But anything we got to say about flavor, taste, health, nutrition, take it out. We took it all out. And I got beliefs that from a nutritional perspective, health perspective, some other perspectives, we do raise a superior product.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not prepared to argue about it. If you want to argue about the land, the animals, and the community, I'm your guy. But if you want to talk about nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
there are people that just are a lot more capable of that than me.
Mm-hmm.
So we completely rethought that. Well, I've been embarrassed being with other grass-fed producers and them start talking about how their grass-fed beef's as tender as any on the market. No, it's probably not. Don't say that. Don't say that with me sitting beside you. I don't believe it. And so
You can get marbling in grass fed, you can, but it's different than just shoving the corn to them.
yeah, I mean you can make it a little more tender than it would be otherwise, absolutely. But you won't make it as tender as a 1,400-pound steer that's been on confinement feeding with a high concentrated diet for 10 months. Nah.
Yeah.
But the way you can improve it, and back to the grazing question, is through proper grazing, is what I've seen.
Absolutely. So the but there are things that we had to learn to do to benefit the land, so that it could benefit the plant, so it could benefit the animal, and we figured those out, and we've gotten pretty good at it. And I say we, I don't mean White Oak Pastures, I mean we, the grass-fed beef producers in this country that I know. There's some really good ones.
So when you're going, I know when we were driving around the farm, you said when you were doing industrial style beef, you just had cows out on pasture, and they just stayed in that same pasture all the time. So when you go to make that change, who did you go to? Like, where did you start that learning process of actually setting up fences and paddocks and how much rest time and all those kinds of things?
That's a good question. And I didn't have a mentor. I mean, there was probably, Alan Savory was out there. He knew all that stuff, but I didn't know him. I met him in 2000 and something. But he would have been a great resource had I known Alan and known to pull from him. There's a guy named Gabe Brown in North Dakota, is my best friend. His book right there. He's coming the week after next, coming to see me. And he and I were figuring it out at the same time. We didn't know each other. We could have helped each other, but he lived in North Dakota. Might as well have been in Russia. So, most of it was figured it out myself. I mean, I went to, back then there weren't nearly as many schools and things as there are now. That might be a good thing. Some of these, it's amazing to me. I'm on all the emails and I see books and schools and classes offered by people I never heard of, and how come I never heard of you? I've been here the whole time.
Is it? Sometimes you just have to do something and figure it out.
Yeah,
You can't just learn.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say it, but some of this boils down to those who can't teach.
No, that's what I'm getting at. That's that's exactly what I'm saying. Is I'm guilty of this. I try not to be mean spirited, but it's just genetic. But sometimes I'm around somebody and I'll say, well, how much of this have you done? How many acres? How many head did you have? What'd you do with it? And it's amazing how quickly people just go on
Oh, no farmer respects the opinion of anybody as much as another farmer.
Right. I want to know what you're doing. Don't tell me what you read.
And I think
those bookshelves over there are full of books that people have given me. I didn't buy a single one of them. I can give you my word. I didn't buy any. I bought Gabe's, but that's the only one I bought. On how to manage the land, how to manage the animals, the rural economy. I've tried to read them, and I didn't get but just a few pages in.
I think the two things that the expansion of the network of whether it's regenerative or organic or grazing and all those things are somewhat intertwined. The expansion of resources that are available is it lessens the amount of failure. The failure rate at the very beginning may be lessened somewhat by somebody new stepping in, but you can also get completely overwhelmed by mob grazing and intensive rotational, and you throw all these different names that have expanded and they've got followings and so on and so forth, and then all of a sudden you're up in no man's land.
And the experts that think they own a phrase or some words or a procedure, you don't own it. And I'm not claiming what I'm telling you what we've been doing here. Yep. And you may have been doing it too. Great. You may do it better. That's good. And that gets me to the book that we got, and it's that's kind of a complicated story, but we were contacted by some folks that represent Viking Penguin Random House, and very nice people that wanted me to write a book. And the idea of me writing a book is just about funny to me and anybody and to my family. Again, I went to the University of Georgia. I majored in animal science. I made C's in everything I took, and was proud of it. And I don't think in a very linear way. I think the one reason I've done fairly well with this conversion related to the farm is I think very cyclically as opposed to linearly, and that's the way this works. Mm-hmm. But when you're writing a book, this chapter 1 followed by chapter 2 followed by chapter 3. So it's just pretty linear. So I told them no, thank you, I appreciate it, and they wound up talking to my daughter, who is a lot more focused on the public and growth and messaging than I am, and she worked out a deal with them, and they hired an author. Very, very wonderful person named Emily Graven, who lives in California, who is like the epitome of my customer. And she's a writer. And she's the same age as my daughter. She's a sweetheart. She came here and spent a lot of time. And we had a date every Friday afternoon, a phone call that could last from 2 hours to 4 hours. And she's a sweetheart. She's like a drill sergeant. We'd get all the hey, hi, yous out of the way. She'd say, okay. And she'd have questions. She'd ask questions. And I can do that. I can't sit down. I don't think in a linear enough amount to sit down and write a book, because before I get through writing about this, I'm already on something else, and I never get back to the other one. But if she asks me a question, I can stay on it long enough to answer it. Can't, she'll ask it again. Mm-hmm. So it was a really wonderful experience. I hated it, but it was having done it was a really wonderful experience, and I loved her, and do love her. And we finally got through with it, and it was painful, but we marketing it, and it's doing pretty good.
Awesome.
What is the name of the book?
It's called A Bold Return to Giving a Damn. It's something we've said here for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And that was released just late last year, right?
Yeah, October, I think.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Will, we've taken up probably more of your time than we should have, but this has been an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be here. Thanks for showing us the farm, taking the time to sit down with us. This has been since we started this podcast in 2017, you've been on the list, and we finally got here, so really appreciate you taking the time.
I can't tell you when I've enjoyed or more than anymore. Y'all are great people. I really enjoy talking to you.
We appreciate it, and thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.